but when I saw this the first time, I was like, I don't know what to say, this is amazing. So I really have to congratulate you on this extraordinary film. I mean, my first question is really simple, because as I told you before, when I watched this a couple weeks ago in the morning, and that afternoon I was supposed to work, and I spent all afternoon on Wikipedia reading about Father Valente and the Chronovisor. And so my first question is really, how did you find out about the Chronovisor, Father Valente? And when did you decide to make a film about it? Because if I'm not mistaken, you initially wanted to do a documentary about Father Valente, and then it became the Chronovisor. So how did it go?
Yeah, well, the place we discovered it, I was reading this book called Angels, Archons, and Aliens, which is like this huge book about exotheology, which is how the search for extraterrestrial intelligence relates to our theological conception of the world. It's a book that only crackpots read, honestly. It's totally insane. I mean, there's a diversion in it. There are many insane diversions, but one was this 10-page stretch called Father Vallente's Chronovisor. And we made a lot of films about spiritual subject matter, so that immediately caught my attention. I just liked the word Chronovisor as well. Just had a nice ring to it. And then as I read the pages, which were just an interview with him, it was just insane and incredibly compelling. Obviously, so much of it sounds ludicrous, but then there are these details that are really give you pause. You're like, why would he say that? Is that a lie? That sounds so real. And there's that was the day the entry into the rabbit hole began. And we saw cinema in it right away, so I sent it to Jack and take over.
Yeah, I mean, it really did start from a place of our own just interest in the device and the conspiracy theory itself, more so than knowing we wanted to make a film about it. So there was a period of at least a couple months probably of just talking about it, going down his initial Wikipedia pages and YouTube videos and blogs and deeper and deeper and deeper, without any particular agenda for turning this into a movie, just because we were very interested in it, obsessed with it. And I think the very first version of the sort of turning it into some sort of visual art was Kevin did a very early version of the ending of the film, sort of the last 10 minutes, sort of as its own standalone short film. And that was just, again, not with any larger ambitions other than just really wanting to dive into what it would feel like to use the device and what the experience would be, and how visually and how sonically that would all play out. And it was interesting. I don't think it quite scratched the itch that either of us were hoping to scratch with obsessing over it. And so the idea just stuck around, and then when it came time to thinking about writing a feature fiction project, which is something that we had sort of separately on our minds, we had this other world of ideas about wanting to do something in academia with an academic set in these old libraries and shot with 16mm, and these sort of other pet interests we had. And then at some point, naturally, just two ideas became one, and it became clear that this is what our academics should be obsessing over, just as we've been obsessing over it for the past 6 months at that point. So that's sort of how it took the final feature shape.
Well, yeah, and we'd also been thinking for a while about making a mystery film. We just wanted to try working in genre, and it's when life presents you with a mystery that's incredibly interesting, it means you don't have to write one. So we just got to interpolate that into the film, save ourselves 60% of the screenwriting that we would have to do typically to make a film. So it just kind of wrote itself, which was, when you're a lazy writer, it's really, really nice.
I was telling Anne Laure earlier that my wife is an academic, and I can tell you every week she dreams about mysteries and solving mysteries. We wake up and say, did you sleep well? I don't know, I almost died, this is what she dreams about. So Anne Laure, please tell me, you are a professor of behavioral sciences in Paris. How did you get involved in this trip?
These guys reached out to me in that I almost, you know how you hit the delete button on most of these emails that seem to come from bots from somewhere. And thankfully, Jack emailed me and mentioned that he was a student at the Auen Film School and an MBA student. And those two things together cannot come from a box. So, and then the next line when we're doing an academia noir. And I was like, oh, what's an academia noir? And I was reviewing papers, revising a manuscript, you know, all these plumbing that we do in academia. Any academic in the room will know what I'm talking about. And I was like, wow, an academia noir, I want to know more. So I replied, and then we talked. I saw their shorts. I loved their shorts. There was really a paw, I think, you know, that you have a voice in your shorts. It's very distinctive, for better or for worse. And I was like, okay, I feel sufficiently safe that let's do this. You know, in research, most of the research projects we undertake fail. 80% of the data I collected over my career is exactly in the trash bin. Yeah? And so that was like another research project where I was like, I feel good about this. Like, let's see what this is going on. And that's how we took it. And what I find fascinating about this fake news, so fake news is a big topic in academia right now. And what I love about this movie is everything is false, except it's true. Right? It's a true fake news story, and that kind of play with playfulness with what's true, what's untrue, is what keeps your mind kind of bothered throughout. I think one of the elements, and that was exciting.
Did you also think that this was an opportunity to play sort of a detective? You know, it wasn't just like a professor, but the film is really about, I mean, it's about several things, but it's really about the thrill of reading and how reading can transport you to a different dimension, let's say.
It's the thrill of research, and so I'd like to tell them and thank them for finally, you know, researchers are not poorly understood people. You know, we get paid less than if we went to the industry, people don't understand us, why you do what you do, and your ivory tower thingy, yeah? Now you understand, it was really interesting because I got the script and I worked off the script for acting purposes, but then when I discovered the movie, I was like, wow, like the role of music, the music in my head, right? The music is almost as important a character as Beatrice herself. I think I would argue actually music is more important, and any researcher in the room will understand that little, you know, nagging music that just keeps you obsessed and want to know more. And I think that's the magic of research. It's not so much, I mean, reading, yes, by the way, it's the first movie, to the best of my knowledge, where you read the movie. All of you are Netflixing away in your beds where you used to read a book 20 years ago, and now you come to the movie theater to read the film. It's kind of cool, right? And again, it was very audacious, and to, I think to get to what we feel as researchers, like what makes us stay where we are, I used to think only literature could get at that, and these guys proved me wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you captured it in a brilliant way. So tell me a bit about that process of deciding how to highlight the reading process of a researcher, even the way you highlight certain parts of books, and then you really make the camera dive into the research, because it feels like we are doing the research with Anne Laure's character at the same time. So tell me a bit about that process. If you had like other references from other films, other directors, how did you discuss it?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, you know, we love films that have research scenes, library scenes. You know, we find it very cozy and very like addicting to watch people research. But in the majority of films, those scenes are shown through montage. You know, you kind of fade through them. You see the lights slowly going on in the library and the hands on the clock turning. You get little pieces of their research, and we were like, what if it would be interesting if there was a movie that was just that for the entire movie? Which I think it's pretty obvious that that's a bad idea. Like, there's a reason that it is done in montage, because like it's extremely, what they're doing is typically very tedious and time consuming. But when we thought about how tedious it was, we were like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And because it's so tedious, it's possible that not a lot of people have tried to put it on film, which I guess is just like a really bad idea. The more that I think about it, because it could have been so boring, and I bet some of you did find it very boring. But that was what excited us. We were like, can you make something that's boring, cinematic? Is that possible? And since it was our first film, there wasn't much money on the line. We were like, let's just see if it will work.
Yeah, I mean, and then as for like the more specific techniques that we used, I mean, some were found pretty early on, and some were found like as late as the edit. So, like for example, the sort of scenes where there's sort of one sentence filling up the entire screen, and then eventually one word, filling up the entire screen one after the other. That came from, like, I was a psychology major in undergrad, and I remembered just in one of our lectures them like showing us a speed reading technique that people would, like you basically would display one word in succession after the other. You could slowly speed up the pace until you're reading significantly faster than you could read normally. And I don't know, that just like buried itself somewhere in my mind. And then one day when we were talking about possible ways to, if we're gonna have audiences read for 45 minutes, how to keep that dynamic and how to communicate like something with the tools that we have at our disposal beyond the content of the words themselves. And so that just like popped back up in one of those discussions. And then other things like the sort of superimposition of the text was more of like an editing discovery, which is hard. It's like really hard to imagine there was a version of this movie that was just subtitling stuff traditionally, but that is kind of what we had in our mind originally, and then it became clear that was not going to work, and that this idea would work much better. So it sort of depended on the scene, how we actually landed on the final techniques.
Well, it's not boring at all. It's thrilling because the film seems to reflect or touch on the obsession, or obsessions in general, but the obsession we have to try to find an answer to why are we here, where are we living these lives, where are we going, and I wanted to really talk a little bit about the final sequence of the film, the climax. I do not want you to explain me how you did it. I don't really think that's interesting. I just think that it's a trip, and when I watched the film, it took me to the trip of 2001: Space Odyssey, because it's a film about also, this guy, an astronaut, who's looking for answers. Why does this universe exist? And the obsession of looking for that answer. And in a way, the revelation, the scary revelation, as he approaches an answer, that we will not. The truth is getting an answer that is in us, not in the universe. So we have in us this scary trip and the answers we are looking for can change our lives and take us, out of the present in a way. I'm not being very articulate, but so in a way, this is about also the effect of moving images, cinephilia. My father might be saying, "I am a camera myself." So was that also in the back of your mind, the obsession of just diving into moving images, of the answers that the moving images can bring to us, in this obsession of trying to find an answer? Because this is also Chronovisor. In a way, the first camera and projector of the Lumia brothers, it could film and project films. So that was also sort of a Chronovisor. So I was interested in hearing you guys tell us if that was also in the back of your mind when you're making a film, sort of not an homage to the moving image, but definitely, the depth of moving images and the effect that they can have us in our minds.
Honestly, you said that way more articulately than we could probably, so I'm tempted to just like let that be the answer. But yeah, where to go from there? We knew we had the ending from the beginning. Like I said, it was like the short film version was something we always knew we were working towards. And I think honestly, the motivation for moving in that direction was much more like aesthetic and emotional and pacing than it was like a hard logical, conclusion to an argument or a thesis or something like that. It just felt like, we knew we were asking the audience to give us the benefit of the doubt in many ways, give us their patience, give us their goodwill, and we needed to pay that off in some way, by operating in like a different mode than we had for the rest of the film, and so just, I don't know, that feeling of like kind of being shot out of a cannon right at the end of the film, like that's as specific as I could even remember feeling about why that just felt like the right ending for the movie. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, just thinking back to the beginning of the question, to some extent in everything we've done, like we're really fascinated with this idea that, we all have some sort of innate upward yearning of the soul towards some transcendent horizon or some spiritual vista that is driving all of our behaviors, and the various ways that those manifest in people, both in like the enlightened and benighted ways. And we've wrote characters who land at different ends of that enlightened, benighted spectrum, and there is a point, where obviously the film is very focused on words, but we also are really interested in, what that spiritual aspect of existence that lies beyond words. So we knew we wanted to break out from the constraints of the written word at some point, and honestly, the dichotomy of it was something that we found, could help us be emphatic about that transition. So yeah, I don't think I want to go too much more into it than that.
Can you also talk about the music of Gustav Holst? Was it that decision made very early on that you wanted to use the music for the film, or?
Yeah, pretty early on. Kevin was the one who ultimately found the planet's suite, so I'll let him talk about that more specifically. But just in general terms, we definitely knew that we wanted an orchestral score for the film. Which is not that common in certainly American film in the last 10, 15 years. We love movies that don't have that kind of score as well, but that was just something we knew we were, had to do a lot with the various influences in the film that we were pulling from in this era of the 90s and 2000s, this sort of grand sweeping orchestras, and knowing in vague terms that we wanted something that felt grand, something that felt mysterious, something that felt cosmic or like bigger than the movie, which is so small in other ways and confined in other ways, sort of like playing against that. So we knew in vague terms we were looking for something like that, and so that was just leading to a lot of listening to classical scores and suites and anything you could find, and then Kevin ultimately found.
Yeah, we also love copyright-free music.
Cosmic is a key word here because it's a film by Cosmic Salon. You guys work under the name of Cosmic Salon, and I did some research on why you use that name, and this was related to a project you guys had in high school about creating a fictional dialogue between two dead historical figures and create something out of it, which I think is just fascinating because in a way, moving images is also, at least for me, it might be very personal, but the language of the dead. So tell us more about that name and how that connects to the work that you guys do.
Yeah, you do your research, that's basically all true. We met when we were like 12 years old in middle school and have known each other and been making, backyard movies with our friends and parents and stuff since then. And then, in high school, there was a Professor Hastings, who had an assignment every year that was that. Basically, you would write, what would Aristotle and de Tocqueville talk about, watching the French Revolution or something. And you could pick your various figures, and that was just a project that stuck with us, 10 years later or however long, and just felt like it captured a lot of the various spiritual and aesthetic and kind of other pet interests we had, sort of summed it up nicely in one phrase, so thank you, Mr. Hastings.
I'm not sure if we have mentioned this yet, but we also tried to write a feature-length screenplay of like a bunch of historical figures getting together and having a dinner party. It was called Cosmic Salon, and it sucks. It's really so
you're like 17 or whatever.
Yeah, so we abandoned it at like 45 pages, and we were like, okay, maybe we can at least salvage the name and use it for something.
You're right, I found that. I only have time for one more question. So, being Portuguese, I really wanted to hear you speak about, you know, that's Portugal you filmed right before, you know, the final sequence, and what you found in that place, because it seems otherworldly, you know, even though, because the interesting thing about the film, it's in fact, you know, it's about like a fantasy or real news, as you said earlier, but it's really very also realistic. You know, it's we identify these places: New York, Portugal. You know, paper, books, monitors, TVs. But it's always there's this connection between reality and fantasy, and we arrive to Sagres, Portugal, the coast of Portugal, but suddenly it seems like we're in Raul Ruiz Village of Pirates, you know, something like that. So tell me how you found that place, how you got there, and what you were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, and so to just set the stage, I guess we knew we wanted something, you know, a sort of third act of the film that left the ivory tower and sort of brought things down into the real world. We didn't have much more specific to go on than that. You know, Europe felt like a natural place to go, given like where the central conspiracy theory takes place. And so in very early conversations with Anne Laure, we were discussing our various options. You know, Father Annetti's from Italy, maybe we could go to Italy. Greece is a place that like Kevin has family connections to, so maybe we could go there. And then Anne Laure volunteered the information that her husband is Portuguese and that they go to this town on the southwestern coast of Portugal every summer, and we just invited ourselves over, basically. So I don't know if you want to take it from there.
That's not, we don't have the same memory of that. Number one, we didn't know each other in person yet.
Yeah, just
which
over
was
Zoom.
good. We were getting acquainted, we were smelling each other. I was not sure, you know, the trust was not fully there yet. And they said, okay, so we're thinking of shooting end of August in Italy, in the monastery. Do you think you could come? And I was like, well, you know, actually, you know, I have this sacred 2 weeks with my family in Portugal. So back off, you know, was the subtext kind of, do your movie some of the time. And then they said, oh, where do you go? And they started moving. And I'm like, savage. And they look at me, oh, yeah, that can work. Okay, we're going to go. I was like, okay. And at that time, I hadn't told my husband I was coming there. Coming to our holiday home. And I'm on 15th of August to shoot for 2 days. And I have to say this, the creative process of these two is just out of this world. I can tell you, like, as I was making the movie with them, as I was watching them as much as they were putting me in the cam, and I do creativity research, it's exceptional what I saw. And it's kind of funny because when you're seeing something this good at the process level, you know it's going to be good. So I didn't know what the movie would look like, but I'm like, this is going to be good. I can tell you, I can't wait for the next Owen Walker movie. Like, you have in the process, it's 2 co-directors. Can you imagine? Just how unlikely that is? Like the ego management, just that. No, but they were like one beast the whole time, and so respectful and so fun. It was complete bliss. It was, you know, you had a freedom and talking about trust, you know, after the initial bumps of over to a vacation home. I don't know if you know the scene at the end where I go against the procession. Okay, that was decided, what, 2 days before? They didn't know, we didn't know, but I told them, you know, they're coming 15th of August. Actually, that's a bad idea, because that's a one-day Saturday that they do a procession of Virgin Mary to the sea, to bless the sea, because it's a fisherman's village.
All over the coast in Portugal, you have 15.
Right? Yeah, and they went like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if Beatrice walked like, you know, like, okay, yeah. And so, you know, the cognitive flexibility was out of this world, really. I mean, you are so flexible, and it's marvelous, especially in this very constrained format. So we had one shot for this procession, one chance, right? I mean, it's not that, you know, they hired all this crowd. The crowd was there, and I walked against the way. There was one shot. They were perched on the hill. I was actually concerned that they might fall, and boom, and it was in the can. Unbelievable. Right? And that's when you feel like, okay, these two, I think they can do great things.
It was worth it, and it is exceptional. So thank you again.